The strikes, the warnings, the blockade, and the stalled talks. When you put all of this together, are we looking at a pause that's buying time or a pause that's masking escalation? We get the answers as Ben Aris joins us live. He is founder and editor-in-chief of BNE Telenews. Ben, welcome to WION World is One. It's great having you here. We're hearing Donald Trump insist the ceasefire is intact, but almost at the same time, there are air defense activations and blasts being reported in Tehran. Help us understand, what does a ceasefire even look like on the ground right now? Technically, was there ever a ceasefire?
Well, this ceasefire is characterized by continuing fire. It's very fragile, it's unstable, and the situation's very confused. I mean, the idea was complete ceasefire and then to spend a month doing a negotiated deal to end this war. What's happened in practice is that it's not working. However, we have not resumed the conflict in a full scale, but they're taking potshots at each other, because there's been a lot of confusion, there's been a lot of promises. The Gulf partners are very angry at the States in the sense that America tried to take a couple of ships through the Strait of Hormuz and they were attacked, and so they fired back. And then Iran played its trump card and started sending rockets into the UEA and the other Gulf states. And the Gulf states had opened their airspace on the understanding that there was going to be a ceasefire, a proper ceasefire and negotiations. But when the retaliation happened, they were told by the states that, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to absorb these losses, because for political reasons, Trump needs the ceasefire to work. He needs an off-ramp. He needs to get out of this. And the Gulf states were not prepared to just roll over and allow their oil assets, their money-making cash cows, to be pummeled with Iranian missiles. And so they withdrew the permission for the US to use their airfields. And that then scuppered the whole Project Freedom operation, because it doesn't work without air support. And so Trump was put in the humiliating position where within 48 hours he had to end the operation. But it means that the White House is still saying it was a great success and we got a couple of ships through and the ceasefire is still in place, whereas in practice none of that's true. And we've kind of gone back to this unstable sort of ceasefire that we had before.
But as you just said, the ceasefire does not look like a ceasefire anymore, and Iran is saying the war is not over and hinting at stronger retaliation, while the US says it is acting in self-defense. Are both sides now preparing the ground for the next phase, which actually has already started with the latest round of strikes?
I think a better way of characterizing it is that Donald Trump finds himself in a dead end. He started this war, and now the goal, as Rubio, the foreign minister of the States, said, like, we just want things to go back to the way they were before we started this war, which is crazy, just to open the straits and have it as an international waterway for everyone to use. And on the Iranian side, they're like, no, you started this, and we now control the Strait of Hormuz, your nightmare scenario. And actually, you're making all these demands on us, so we're not going to stop. We're going to continue to throttle the global economy by restricting oil exports. And here's our list of demands, which is security guarantee for never again TAC, which is reparations in some form, and the permission to continue their nuclear program in some form, although they've made serious concessions on that point. And they're playing for time, because actually Trump is the one who's constrained by time. He's facing midterm elections in November, and he needs to have finished this war before then. He needs to see oil prices come down, because that's a big political issue in the States. And the Iranians are like, you've done so much damage, we're hunkered down, we'll just sit here and continue this war for as long as it takes for you to concede defeat. And Trump is just trying to find some face-saving way out of this, which is why he has to, and he is continuously pretending that the ceasefire is holding and that there's some sort of real negotiations going on, whereas Tehran has said this 14-point plan that Trump was talking about the last 2 days, it doesn't exist and we're not talking about that.
And as you just rightly said, Trump is trying to find a way, and just alongside that, we see Russia and China push back at the United Nations. So does that tell you the diplomatic space is shrinking even as the military theater expands.
Indeed, and China and Russia are in kind of an interesting position because, I mean, the way I see this is that this conflict increasingly looks like the Ukrainian conflict, but with the roles reversed. And in the Ukrainian conflict, the West, the EU, and before the States were backing Ukraine in a proxy war against Russia to wear down its military capabilities. And now we're seeing pretty much the same thing going on in Iran, whereas China and Russia have a vested interest in supporting Iran to make sure, like in Ukraine, that it doesn't lose this war. They're not going to give it anything to allow it to win this war. They're not going to get directly involved themselves. But it's a proxy war that, in this case, is trying to wear down the US military capabilities, and it's done that very effectively. Moreover, all the American bases in the Gulf have been cleaned out and destroyed. And the security guarantee that the states used to promise to the Gulf states is shown to be a sham. It's worthless. It hasn't been able to protect anybody. And so for Russia and China, they've basically kicked the US out of the Gulf and weakened its military and also destroyed its reputation as the provider of security, as the global policeman. So for them, this has all been, I don't want to say a great outcome, but certainly they've got a lot of advantage. And that also suggests that the politics of this will continue. And again, now you've got China and Russia also vested in making sure that Iran can sit this out with its maximalist demands and to see the humiliation of the states having to give in to that, leaving Trump in this impossible position.
Yes, as you say it correctly, Trump is in an impossible situation. And when we see at the war in West Asia, there's a pattern here. Every strike is being justified. Every counter-strike is being denied. We realize this the more we talk about the war. There's also a credibility gap opening up. The US says its ships were not hit. Iran says they were. Are we watching a conflict where narrative control actually is becoming as important as military control?
Yeah, it's incredibly, as a conflict goes, this isn't just like a battle like we have in the Donbass where, you've got soldiers shooting each other, trying to kill each other, as many as they can. Everything is flavored with politics because of this negotiations that's going on, because of this political trap that Trump's found himself in. And ultimately, everybody is vested in ending this conflict. China particularly is heavily dependent for its energy, and its economy is hurting. The whole of the Asian region, Southeast Asia, their economies are hurting really badly to the point where we're going to see an inflation shock, food shock. Some of the weaker governments like Pakistan face financial crises if this continues. And because of all these elements, they're all putting pressure on the players to bring this to an end. And so all of the claims of this ship was hit, that ship was hit, are colored by politics. And within the within the Navy, there are reports coming out that there's now serious arguments going on between the White House, between the Trump administration itself, the executive, and the military command. Trump's saying go into the Straits, and the Navy is saying no, we're not doing that because it's too dangerous. We can't protect ourselves against these missiles. And if you imagine the scenario that you have a big ship, big war, $13 billion American warship in the Straits, and it gets disabled by an Iranian missile or drone, which is entirely possible. The illusion that America has the most powerful military in the world gets shattered, or at least has a military powerful enough to provide impervious protection to anyone, becomes shattered. And so they don't want to go there. So again, the claims of what's been hit, what hasn't been hit are extremely important because America's reputation is on the line and it's already had a battering.
Indeed. Now, when we talk about this war, there are several contentious points. Take the Strait of Hormuz. Donald Trump launches Project Freedom, as you earlier mentioned, to escort ships. Iran redraws its control lines and warns vessels. On the ground, who do you think is actually deciding what moves and what doesn't? And how much pressure is there on both sides right now?
There's enormous pressure. And again, it's very hard to say, fog of war, opaque reporting, particularly coming out of Tehran. But like I said, that there's now dissension within the US military between the commander-in-chief and the guys that are actually doing these operations. But at the same time, if you watch the Iranian reporting, there's various fractions within the what's left of the high command and the administration. The new Ayatollah himself is pretty clearly in hospital, having been hurt in the initial assassination attempt that killed his father. So he's not in charge. And there's various players. You've got sort of more liberal side of Aragachi, the foreign minister, who is trying to do a deal in order to end this. And then you've got a more hardcore fraction in the IRGC, which are just being bloody-minded, and they're saying we're going to fight to the death until we get what we want. And that complicates all the politics even more. And the talks, they seem to have broken down completely, that there's just no conversation going on between sides. Trump is sending envoys, but then they were in Pakistan recently, and then the Iranian foreign minister left before he talked to them. So everyone's posturing. And as I say, the positions are very different. Trump's talking about a 14-point plan, but it's a list of demands. And the Iranians have their very hard, maximalist 3-point plan. And they're just going to stick to that for the meantime and see,
The positions are indeed very different, but diplomacy will only be possible if both of them can come to a point. And when we talk about diplomacy, Iran is demanding guarantees before it moves, while the US wants commitments up front. Is this essentially a deadlock that is now dressed up as negotiation? What are we looking at?
It's a deadlock. But the problem is, look, on the Iranian side, they've actually made a concession. They've said, look, we will give up our stockpile, 400 kilos of highly enriched uranium. And that was nominally why this whole war started, in order to ensure that Iran would never be able to build a nuclear weapon. So they've actually conceded now the biggest thing, which says to me that, Iran does want to stop this. It is causing incredible pain. The economy was on its back before this started, and now it's being absolutely destroyed. And on the Trump side, he's got this ego problem of his personal problem that he doesn't want to concede defeat. But, he's got a political problem too, that he is facing these midterms, and that he's been selling himself as a peacemaker worthy of a Nobel Prize. And what he's done is actually start the biggest regional war in the Middle East for decades, and at the same time, ruined a whole bunch of relationships, and America's reputation around the world is now as a warmonger. So he's done exactly the opposite of how he perceives himself. And I think it's actually going to boil down to Trump is the one that needs to make concessions. He's going to have to do some very unpalatable deal, which probably, highly likely, leaves the Strait of Hormuz under Iranian control with this toll routes system they have now, where they charge people to go through and they control it. And the solution is the White House has to find some sort of face-saving formula. So, for example, Project Freedom, technically, Rubio was saying that ends Operation Epic Fury, the military campaign. So we're now technically into a new phase now, Project Freedom, which is about negotiation and ending. But it's a show, it's a sham. I mean, nothing's changed. And they've just changed the name in order to sell it to the public. And this formula is not going to work. And how they actually get out of it, what kind of formula they can offer that actually concedes everything that Iran's asking for, is not clear to me at all. So I think one of the possible solutions is Trump's about to go to Beijing. And I think there he's going to appeal to Xi Jinping, who really does have leverage over Tehran because of the economic ties, and ask China to take this over so that he can walk away and say this is China's problem now, and China is the one that's going to fix it. And then I didn't do anything wrong, I didn't lose the war, and it's China that finishes it. But I doubt Beijing will go for that. It's because it has this policy of staying out of the way. But it is a possibility, and it could work, and it is one of the possible ways of actually stopping this conflict.
All right, thank you for your insights, Ben. It was a pleasure having you here.
My pleasure.